SCO in 2017, a lot was different from now. The Pulwama terror attack and India's retaliatory bombing of Balakot had not happened. Prime Minister Narendra Modi was hosting Chinese President Xi Jinping on bilateral summits, and the chemistry was a hot topic for debate among foreign policy wonks. In the 5 years that followed, New Delhi has been betrayed by its two key neighbours. While Pakistan's support to terror attacks may not have come as a surprise, the unkindest cut came from China. Chinese encroachment into Indian territory in Ladakh escalated to the bloody face-off in Galwan in 2020 that left many soldiers dead. Today, the two sides have disengaged in Pangong So and Hot Springs, but stalemate continues in Depsang and Demchok. So when Prime Minister Modi sits at the table with Xi Jinping and Pakistan's new Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, as a part of the SCO meetings, the question among diplomats is how far can India go? Is it time to break the ice or is it too early for that?
There is a much bigger issue of the LAC and the border disputes and the discussions. The next step will be to resolve the outstanding issues that have been there between our two countries.
In his brief statement ahead of the summit, Prime Minister Modi has said that he will hold bilateral meetings with some leaders without specifying details.
Besides his bilateral with the host country, chair of the SCO summit, Uzbekistan's Prime Minister will have other bilateral meetings on the sidelines of the summit.
The spotlight is on the SCO for one other reason too. Russia's war on Ukraine will soon enter the 8th month, and there are no signs of it ending anytime soon. The grouping, with no members from the West, is viewed with suspicion by the advanced world, with India being the exception.
For now, it seems like the focus will continue to remain areas of mutual interest, be it security, trade, or for that matter, economy. Meanwhile, a decision on bilateral or pull asides with the Chinese and Pakistani leadership will have to wait. In Samarkand, Geeta Mohan for India Today.
So is it time to break the ice with China and Pakistan, or is it too early? What does this disengagement that's taken place on the LAC signify? Can India really trust China and Pakistan anymore? Joining me now, four top voices. Kanwal Sibal, former Foreign Secretary, joins me. KC Singh, former Secretary at the Ministry of External Affairs. Brahma Chelani, leading strategic affairs expert, tracked China for years. G. Parthasarathy, former Indian High Commissioner to Pakistan. Let's start with China first. And I want to get each of you to give us your sense of whether the Prime Minister should be meeting the Chinese head in Samarkand. You, G. Parthasarathy, first. Do you believe that given the disengagement that's taken place in Ladakh, the time has come to maybe have a face-to-face direct meeting between the two leaders in Samarkand?
Look, I've dealt with the Chinese when I was in Delhi. They were still in charge of, taken control of Sumdorong-chu in Arunachal Pradesh, but that didn't stop the Prime Minister from visiting China and talking one-on-one to Deng Xiaoping. So, more so in a multilateral meeting, when there is a chance of talking to someone with whom you may have differences, I would personally believe you go ahead and talk, and you put your point of view across firmly, and knowing Mr. Modi, he would do precisely that. In the case of Pakistan, I think Shehbaz Sharif is under pressure from the army not to have a meeting. But my own reading of Shehbaz is that amongst all the prime ministers I've known in Pakistan, he was then chief minister, not prime minister. He was a reasonable guy, actually interested in developing cooperation with IT in Bangalore. He's much better than his brother that way. So I think, of course, President Putin is an old friend. Right. So I think, as far as I am concerned, it would be good. We're not sort of asking for these meetings, we're suggesting it, and it's for them to determine. I want to also mention one thing, that in the case of Sumdorong-chu, as I said, they vacated 6 years after the visit of the Prime Minister. So the Chinese have a tendency to drag on, but that's a call the Prime Minister and his
Okay,
officials.
we'll also play the shots of how things have changed, because remember a few years ago, Prime Minister Modi and President Xi were on a swing, a jula in Ahmedabad. Things have, of course, changed a lot since then. But Kanwal Sibal, what's your sense? Should the Prime Minister use this opportunity to send a message to China after what's happened in Galwan, despite the disengagement that's taking place? There's been no real de-induction, no real de-escalation. Large numbers of troops remain in the area?
Well, the manner in which you have phrased it would suggest that the responsibility for resuming some kind of a contact, engagement or dialogue rests on India. I think the opposite is the case. If the Chinese have some agenda in mind of de-escalation, and before they do that, they have reached out to us and outlined to us broadly what their thinking is, and think that when the two principals meet, if they meet, they can have a discussion and on that basis proceed forward. Now, we are not aware as to what may be happening behind the scenes, whether there has been any contact between the two sides along the lines that I've mentioned. It will not be wise to go into such an important meeting unprepared, without knowing what the agenda is, without knowing what the Chinese are thinking, and without knowing how we would react to any proposal that China might make on the spot. It can't be ad hoc and impromptu. Therefore, I would be very cautious about any such meeting unless it has been properly prepared and we've got signals from the other side that a breakthrough of the kind that we expect in terms especially of de-escalation, apart from disengagement in the two remaining areas of Demchok and Tepsang, is on the agenda. I don't think any purpose would be served. And in fact, we would be losing diplomatically if we did that, because it would appear as if we were keen to have a meeting, as if we were under pressure, and we thought we would reach out and get something from Xi Jinping, giving him the upper hand and giving him this chance before the November meeting, when he expects to have the third term, to build up his reputation, that despite having committed aggression against India, and India's firm stand that it will not allow normalization unless the status quo ante was restored, or at least unless the consequences of the aggression were removed, we've just given him a diplomatic victory. Why should we do that?
So you're saying no question of any ad hoc meeting with the Chinese unless there is a clear agenda as to what the Chinese have in mind. Brahma Chelani, as someone who over the years has been very skeptical of the Chinese, do you believe that 2 years after Galwan, and given what's happened earlier this week in terms of disengagement that's taken place, that this is an appropriate time to at least break the ice?
Well, there are two things we should remember. First, China is playing the long game in the Himalayas through its frenzied buildup of warfare infrastructure. We have seen new security installations, roads, helipads, electronic warfare facilities, dual-use border villages, and other infrastructure coming up. These new and emerging realities hold long-term military implications for India. They go beyond what's happening in Ladakh. Second, which is even more important, China's strategy is to keep India engaged while it quietly contains India. Engagement with containment has been China's strategy much before Xi Jinping became president. So the hype in India over any meeting between the Indian Prime Minister and the Chinese leader plays directly into China's hands. Remember what happened to the Wuhan spirit and the so-called Chennai Connect? It only created self-delusions in India. It is also worth remembering that China is a very skilled negotiator. We are seeing the impact of such skilled such negotiations in Ladakh. China first caught India off guard by making several encroachments on Ladakh border areas in April 2020. After that, China has skillfully used lengthy negotiations to take India round and round the mulberry bush and eventually compel India to accept realignment of the Ladakh frontier in 4 different areas. China so far has refused to discuss with India its biggest and deepest encroachments in Tepsang and Demchok. But it has foisted buffer zones in 4 other areas that it encroached upon. And these buffer zones have come up largely on land that India considers its own territory. And each buffer formalizes a changed territorial status quo to China's military advantage.
No, but should we not send the message therefore to the Chinese, use this occasion to say that it will no longer be business as usual? I'm showing those pictures from a few years ago when Prime Minister Modi took President Xi to Ahmedabad and there was this bonhomie and the Ahmedabad spirit. Are you saying that until we get commitments on Depsang, on Demchok, we don't move ahead? Is that what you're saying, Professor Chelani?
Well, first, it's already business as usual. In the 28 months since the Chinese encroachments occurred, despite their ongoing Chinese border aggression, we have allowed Chinese trade surplus with India to spiral to such an extent that last year it overtook India's total defense spending. In a way, India is rewarding China. Far from imposing any costs on China for its aggression, India is letting China have its cake and eat it too.
Okay, those are strong words. KC Singh, your view? The first opportunity in a way since Galwan for the two sides to meet face to face. Should we be taking advantage of it or wait to see what the Chinese have to say before we even agree to any kind of direct communication between the two leaders?
Rajdeep, we already know what the Chinese want to say, because after the so-called withdrawal from Gogra Hot Springs, their foreign ministry spokesman contextualized it. He said there's no question of status quo ante, because we haven't crossed the LAC, India has. And what complicates is that the Prime Minister right at the beginning said Chinese have not crossed the LAC. No, therefore, I totally agree with Mr. Sibal and Ram Chelani that first you have to make a determination whether China strategically is willing to live with the rising India. If they're not strategically willing to live with it, and they want to use the LAC to exert pressure on us every now and then to condition India's behavior, then obviously it's not going to work in a pull-aside meeting at a summit of 8 odd countries. If you want to have a serious engagement, summitry must be prepared for. You should know what the ground rules are. You should know what you're trying to achieve. Because when summitry fails at the highest level, there's no other level to go to. In fact, Henry Kissinger has said that very, very clearly. He said, you do not go to summitry until you have prepared the ground and you know what you're going to achieve through the meeting. Prime ministers and presidents don't meet to figure out what they cannot agree on. You know, that is embarrassing for both. We know what the Chinese want to. And Chinese have a habit of stepping back, slightly easing the pressure at the LAC when they want you to attend something like SCO. You see, for both, the focus is on Putin and Xi. The focus is on what they're going to do together. They're already there. They have met. Focus is not on India. Focus is not on what we're going to do with Chinese. Shake hands with him by all means. And you're at the summit. What you have to say, you can say it through your statement at the summit, directly or indirectly.
Right.
But summitry should be when you're ready for it and you know the Chinese are ready for it.
You know, that's interesting because remember, we've had these summits, the Wuhan spirit, the Mahabalipuram spirit, the Ahmedabad spirit, but it's never really quite worked out. So it seems almost all of you seem to have a consensus. Do not trust the Chinese. Do not move a step forward at this moment. Let's look from there because the Chinese will be there. Putin is there. And importantly, so are the Pakistanis. G. Parthasarthi, your old friend, as you said, Shahbaz Sharif there, whom you said relatively is someone who is a sharp politician, perhaps even sharper than his brother Nawaz Sharif. Should India be reaching out to Pakistan at all at a moment like this, given the fact that Pakistan still really hasn't fully acted against the 2611 perpetrators and the terrorists?
I don't regard all this as reaching out. Your officials make the preparations, they take the call and they tell you. Now it's the political judgment of the Prime Minister to make. I think, yes, with regard to Xi Jinping, there is a measure of uncertainty, but we've always had a measure of uncertainty with China. And the fact is that the talks have produced 50% of the results we wanted. So are we not going to say that we're not going to talk about the remaining 50%? So I'm not saying go and ask for a meeting. If there is a mutual agreement that there should be a meeting, you can't refuse a meeting with the Chinese Prime Minister or with any other head of government.
So
Let us see what the preparations are. And if in the preparations we come to the conclusion that they are not going to yield, after all, they earlier on said they were going to yield nothing.
No, but what about
Shahbaz?
What about Shahbaz Sharif? What about Shahbaz Sharif?
In the north, I have my in the north. I'll be honest with you. I'll be honest with you. In the north, that area is located right across Pakistan-occupied Kashmir and leads to the Karakoram Pass. So it's a highly strategic matter. It will require a lot of discussion and perhaps some compromise which will be found out. But as I said, it is for the call for the Prime Ministers after they have taken into account what their advisors have said.
Okay.
Let me just take that feeling is that you come back from if you come back from Uzbekistan without meeting the Chinese Prime Minister, the world will think it's rather odd. The two biggest powers here, the most influential powers here, and the Chinese have now realized that we are no American stooge, and we run an independent foreign policy. There has been grudging acknowledgement of that in even rags like the Global Times. So, as I said, my view is let the officials work it out. If in their judgment nothing lost, fine. I mean, we are not, as I told you, we went in 1993,
Okay, let me move on, sir. So I'm going to stop you for a moment. You mentioned
we didn't get a result.
Sure, you mentioned what happened earlier. I just need to get in more voices at this moment. Kaval Sibal, Vladimir Putin will be there. The Chinese have already met the Russians. The Pakistanis are expected to also meet Putin, and so that's the one confirmed bilateral that India also has. Given what's happened with Ukraine, do we raise our concerns or not at meetings like this? You've been in Russia in the past. Should we be raising concerns with the Russians, or will that in a way compromise our so-called neutrality that we've observed on the war?
Well, indirectly, we have been raising our concerns, even in the recent virtual meeting which Prime Minister attended. He mentioned the need for a return to dialogue and diplomacy in the case of the Ukraine conflict. Ukraine was not on the agenda of the meeting, but in his prepared statement, Prime Minister mentioned that. And this has been his consistent message. And I think this is very wise, because he's letting President Putin know about India's larger concerns, because there is an overall international impact of a continuing conflict in Ukraine. And at the same time, he's covering his flanks vis-a-vis the United States and others to say that, look, if he's not condemning Putin, or Russia, that's a different matter. But he is not stepping back from his responsibility as a responsible power to actually advocate a return to dialogue and diplomacy. So on both sides, I think he's covering his flanks. There's no need at all to express concerns, because if he expresses concerns about Russia's action, he must express concerns about what NATO has done, what US has done, what European Union continues to do in terms of fueling the conflict, arming Ukraine, and actually conducting a proxy war. So what do we gain by criticizing both sides? I think we should maintain the middle ground, as we have done in all our discussions and all our statements, and that's the wisest thing to do. And actually, doing this in the SCO would be doubly wrong if we were to say something which would appear as a veiled criticism of Russia or Putin.
Okay. Brahma Chalani, China, many believe, is going to be our biggest challenge going ahead, dealing with the Chinese. But the Pakistanis are there, and the Sino-Pakistan axis seems to be as strong as ever. Does India at any stage look at the other countries at the SCO to seek greater support for India's position on our concerns on the border, both with Pakistan and with China?
First, as an organization, the SCO hardly meshes with India's interests. It is increasingly dominated by China and includes India's other regional adversary, Pakistan, which has virtually become China's vassal state. In fact, if you recall, Rajdeep, China ensured that Pakistan joined the SCO along with India.
That's right.
So as to offset India's entry. China has similarly linked India's admission to the nuclear suppliers group with Pakistan's entry. For India, the SCO may hold some value, even if limited value, as part of India's multi-alignment strategy, especially balancing India's widely perceived tilt towards the West. So to show that India prizes its strategic independence, India's participation in SCO meetings may have some symbolic value, but the SCO offers India no strategic value. On the other hand, India's membership in the SCO enhances the importance of the SCO. It lends respectability to the SCO, which otherwise would be seen as a China-Russia enterprise involving autocracies. India is the only established democracy in the SCO. Without India, the SCO would be portrayed as a club of autocracies. But to answer your question on Pakistan, this would be an odd time for India to renew its relationship with Pakistan, given the fact that the US at present is renewing its coddling of Pakistan. The US is now beginning to rearm Pakistan, as the latest F-16 deal shows. Modernizing Pakistan's F-16s will mean arming Pakistan against India, making the F-16s more combat-worthy and deadly against India, blunting India's Rafale advantage. And also, let's not forget that in recent days, the Americans have helped Pakistan to secure a very large IMF bailout of $1.17 billion. And the Americans are also pushing to drop Pakistan from the Financial Action Task Force's so-called grey list. The Financial Action Task Force is going to meet next month at a plenary session. So here we are seeing the mollycoddling of Pakistan. The Pakistanis have not snapped their nexus with state-nurtured terrorist groups.
Right.
If at this time Modi were to reach out to Pakistan, that would really be an inopportune diplomatic overture on India's part.
I take all your points. Final word to you, KC Singh. Therefore, given the limitations, and I think it was very well put just now by Professor Chelani, this gathering at the SCO, India standing out in a way as a democracy surrounded by autocracies, what really can one hope for from a meeting at the highest level that the Prime Minister is having in a multilateral forum, Albert? Can you see any forward movement at all?
Look, firstly, coming to SCO, Rajdeep, it was created 3 months before 9/11. So therefore, its focus was always Afghanistan, terrorism, drugs from Afghanistan. They create RATs, an organization to share intelligence, etc. But the Chinese have slowly, with their Belt and Road Initiative, pushed it in the direction of trade and commercial connections, common market, etc. Now, people waiting in the wings are Saudi Arabia, Egypt. Now it's become larger and larger. So what the Chinese are doing is really enlarging their footprint and creating a counter group to what the Americans are doing. Now, in this, the advantage in being in such a group is that you control the agenda of that group to see that it doesn't become an anti-West forum, which then starts, positing itself against your other friends in the West. Are you able to succeed at that? Now, if you're not, then there is the peril of balancing between two groups, where the Americans will feel that you're pandering to the Russians and the Chinese, and the Russians and Chinese will think you're still an American stooge. So balancing is not always easy, because this is the problem with this, because the majority will be with China, Laos and Cambodia, countries like this, which they want to bring in. It's the Chinese. The Russians have got weakened after Ukraine, and particularly the recent setback in the Kharkiv area.
Right.
So Putin has come there really as a supplicant. And that is why their meeting is very interesting, what is going around on the net, where he is openly saying that I understand the difficulties that you, President Xi, are having with our Ukraine policy. Are they simply doing this to convince the West that they are not together? because they are being watched very closely to see whether Chinese are willing to give military help to Putin, or it's going to be just an energy-based relationship. So it's a turning point for the organization,
right?
And we need to be there, and we should not be distracted by bilaterals.
Okay, the focus, therefore, in a way, needs to be on what China really does next. They will be the centerpiece. Everyone will be watching the Chinese at the SCO very, very closely. I appreciate 4 fine minds joining us and giving our viewers a sense as to why this meet, where the Prime Minister has just landed in Samarkand, is an important multilateral forum. We're getting pictures at the moment of Prime Minister Modi, who's just landed in Samarkand. Thank you very much to all my guests for joining me. Let's move from there to the other big story that today took place. 2 Dalit teenage girls who were found hanging from a tree in Uttar Pradesh's Lakhimpur yesterday were raped and murdered. The autopsy report has confirmed. The bodies of both the girls have been handed over to the family, and the Uttar Pradesh government has assured swift action. The opposition is saying it's a sign of declining law and order, even as those from a neighboring village who did this act have been all arrested. Take a look.
Terrifying, spine-chilling, sinister, yet visuals you cannot look away from. Bodies of 2 young Dalit girls, one 15-year-old, the other 17, hanging from a tree in Lakhimpur Kheri, allegedly kidnapped, raped, strangulated and hanged from a tree. Lalpur Majra, Nighasan district, Lakhimpur Kheri, Uttar Pradesh. A village stunned into silence after a crime which will forever burn a hole through their conscience. Within 24 hours, the UP cops say the case is cracked. 6 have been arrested. Junaid, Sohail, Arif, Hafizur Rahman, Karimuddin and Chotu. As per the cops' theory, Chotu's role was most menacing. Chotu was the neighbor of the 2 deceased girls, belonging to the same caste as them and instrumental in the fate the girls met.
छोटू इस परिवार का बहुत पास रहता है, इनका पड़ोसी है। छोटू ने ही लड़कियों को उन लड़कों से अवगत करवाया है, उनकी दोस्ती करवाई है, इनकी इन्वॉल्वमेंट पूरी है।
As per the cops, the girls were not kidnapped. They went with the 6 accused of their own volition, but the family contests it, insisting both the girls were forcibly taken.
छोटू के साथ कितने लड़के थे?
जी वह 3 लोग थे।
बाइक से आए थे?
जी।
और उसी बाइक पर बैठाल के दोनों लड़कियों को?
जी, यहाँ से घसीटने लगे थे, आगे से बैठाल के ले गए थे।
The cops' version is 2 of the accused came to meet the girls on a motorcycle. The girls knew who they were. The girls went with the accused willingly. 4 other accused joined in. All 6 men gang raped the 2 girls. When the girls insisted on marriage, they were killed and hanged from a tree. What has been cut short in the most heinous way are the lives and dreams of a 15-year and a 17-year-old child. Where these morphed young faces will only but add to hard cold statistics on crime against women. Bureau Report, India Today.
And that hard statistic, as per a National Crime Records Bureau report in 2019, was that a woman is raped every 16 minutes in this country. Unacceptable, needs the strongest punishment possible. No question of remission to the rapists. Now, a day after India Today's investigation exposed the nexus between contractors, politicians and civic officials in Bengaluru, a political showdown has erupted. The opposition in the assembly is trying to corner the Bomai government over the alleged commission Raj in the state. Take a look at what happened.
Pounded and submerged. India Today's deep dive brings to the fore Bengaluru's commission Raj that drowned India's own Silicon Valley early September. Startling confessions of the city's civic contractors on India Today tape.
जो करप्शन का जो है ब्रेकअप क्या है?
तो काम लेने के लिए देना है।
कितना?
काम लेने के लिए 12 to 15.
12 to 15% है।
और बाद में फाइल सभी सभी वर्क ऑर्डर लेने के लिए 2%. तो काम करके बिल लगाने के लिए वो एक आदमी को, एक इंजीनियर को 5, एक इंजीनियर यही
5%
यही का 5 AEE का 3.
अच्छा, ओके।
और अगेन एग्जीक्यूटिव इंजीनियर को 2.
The IT hub's public infrastructure held to ransom by the Neta engineer contractor Nexus. Public works heavily compromised by bribes.
Oh, if he is coming for puja, then he has taken a commission.
Understood. And it's cleared.
Puja means yes.
All party members, all party, not for BJP, not for Congress, not for Jet, all parties. All parties.
Right from the beginning, it has come down.
An investigation that has stirred Karnataka's entire political establishment. The opposition Congress is on the offensive.
So what is the Prime Minister doing? What are the agencies doing? What is ED doing? What is Income Tax doing? What is CBI doing? Even judiciary has to intervene in all these cases. So it is a 40% commission government. Whatever we have been saying, it's not for opposition's sake. It is truth. Truth you have brought out. I congratulate you people.
The issue of Commission Raj that brought Bengaluru to its knees earlier this month set to resonate in the state assembly.
A common man or a woman in Karnataka, if you ask them, they'll say this government is a 40% commission government. So they have earned this name and they're very proud to display that. So this commission sarkar will be thrown out in coming days and we'll take this up in the assembly now.
The ruling BJP, on the other hand, is blaming it on the previous Congress governments.
The corruption means Congress. Congress means corruption. Many scandals in the India and Karnataka. The Congress is the Pitamaha, is the father of all corruptions.
So the contractor has said that it's not just Congress.
They are agents of Congress people.
नेगेटिव नैरेटिव सेट करने के लिए बहुत समय से कांग्रेस कोशिश कर रहा है. वो लोग आज जो भ्रष्टाचार के खिलाफ बात कर रहा है, उनका जमाना में भ्रष्टाचारियों को मदद करने के लिए लोकायुक्त बंद किए थे.
India Today's investigation makes it hard for Karnataka's political class to brush the notorious Commission Raj under the carpet anymore. Power held to account for Bengaluru's mess. Bureau Report, India Today.
Now, a day after India Today exposed that nexus between politicians and contractors, there's been another controversy in Karnataka itself because a special court ordered a Lokayuk probe against former Karnataka Chief Minister B.S. Yediyurappa in a housing project scam. Allegations have been made that Yediyurappa's family members allegedly received 12.5 crore bribe from a construction firm to release funds from departments and to speed up the file clearance. Yediyurappa's son B.Y. Vijendra, his grandson Shashidhar and his son-in-law Sanjay Shri are also accused in the case, apart from the former chief minister. So, are the skeletons really tumbling out of the cupboard in Karnataka? Will this contractor Neta nexus ever be busted? Or is corruption simply too deep-rooted in some states to be cleansed? And how is this Commission Raj going to end? This is a continuing focus here on the news today. Mohandas Pai, Bengalurian investor, man with always strong thoughts, joining me. Abraham TJ is an anti-corruption activist who's taken this case of Yediyurappa up to the Lokayukta. But first to you, Mohandas Pai, do you believe as a result of this constant media pressure in a way on the Commission Raj, will anything change now?
Well, Rajdeep, I'm positive that things will improve and change because the new chief minister is a clean person and is doing many reforms to improve matters. And the elections are coming now, so people are not going to forget. And Prime Minister Modi is watching from Delhi. He has cleaned up Delhi, and he would not like to be, having a tainted government in Karnataka. That's our fond hope. Let us wait to see.
So it's a fond hope, but the fact is, somebody called it Alibaba and Charlie's chore, in the sense 40% commission. The commission Raj has not broken down. Karnataka seems to continue to have the commission Raj. You have faith in Mr. Bomai and Mr. Modi, but on the ground, nothing seems to change.
Rajdeep, this has been going on for 15, 20 years. We have seen it happen in the previous government. We saw it happen in this government. Nothing operates. The whole of South India is happening in a big way because these are all rich states. See, Rajdeep, we have a problem in this country. First is the South are rich states and rich for the pickings. Everybody is making money. It's been going on but increasing year by year. Second, very importantly, we have a broken justice system where none of these people, if caught, are ever brought to trial and put behind bars. It takes 15, 20 years. Now, activists will come and, agitate and show evidence. When is it going to court? Who is going to be sacked? Third, the officials are never sacked from office. Where are the officials who have been sacked? They'll be suspended. After 6 months, they'll come back. Same people will come back. So we need a massive cleanup, Rajdeep. It has come to such levels that today government is paying reportedly for work that was never done. Like the contractor said, they don't go and inspect the work. That means that the work happened. If this contractor is paid 40%, you think they ever done any work on the ground? Fake bills are done, money is siphoned off, no inspection is done, shoddy work is done, if at all. This is a continuing tragedy, Rajdeep. That's why what you have done is fantastic. You have exposed all of them. I wish you do much more with all activists so that people know the truth.
We will continue to do this across. In fact, we plan to do this across metros, because what is happening in Bengaluru is not unusual. It's happening across our cities. But Abraham TJ, you're the person who's taken this case against Yediyurappa and his family to court, when an FIR has been ordered now and the Lokayukta is being ordered to probe it. Do you believe that the evidence is watertight? That here is Mr. Yediyurappa, only recently has been inducted into the BJP's parliamentary board, and now the Lokayukt is investigating him. Do you believe that Yediyurappa's family took these large bribes? You're on mute, sir. You're on mute. You're on mute, sir. You're on mute. Mr. Abraham, you need to get...
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry. Mr. Rajdeep, there are three parts of this complaint. One is 12 crores being demanded by the son of the former chief minister.
Yes.
The second one is 12.5 crores being received. And we have provided substantial evidence which requires a little amount of investigation by the police to file a report.
What is the main evidence you have?
See, the first one is 12 crores is a conversation of the former chief minister's son regarding 12 crore that has to be paid by the contractor to continue with his work.
Right.
Why does he have to pay to continue with his work if he is awarded? I'll take about 30 seconds for this. The estimate for the project was 567 crores. What did this contractor quote? He quotes 675 crores, that is 108 crores more than the estimate which is prepared by the department, engineers, qualified people, paid by us, and yet 108 crores additional quote, and he gets the contract. Now, for him to continue with this profit, they need to get a piece of the share. So the 12 crores is demanded. That demand conversation is already produced before the investigating officers and the court. The second part is we have confirmation of the transaction or the demand and the receipt conversations on the WhatsApp which has been provided. Now, what they like to do is corroborate the investigating officers. But the third one is interesting. 5 crore, 1 lakh and 677,000 rupees. Now, this aspect, 5 crore, 1 lakh is watertight, absolutely tight. I dare the ED, who has been searching all over where they are not able to find anything, just look at that issue. It is the money flow from bogus shell companies straight into the accounts of Mr. Yediyurappa's family. All they like to do is sit in their ED office in Delhi, don't have to move from their chairs, call up these banks, seek the information.
You're saying this.
Will the ED do that?
Okay, that is You know, that is the question. You say, Mr. Mohandas Pai, that you believe, you have faith that the Bomai government, the Modi government will act. And as is being suggested here, this is a watertight case. According to Mr. Abraham, the trail is known. The ED, which is acting in all the opposition-ruled states, needs to act here. You see, Mr. Yediyurappa has just been elevated to the BJP parliamentary board. If you where does your faith then stem from if Mr. Yediyurappa is allowed to get away?
Rajdeep, I agree with you that ED, CBI and others should probe this case. I'm sure Mr. Abraham will be able to give the evidence because he has strongly shown the data for this case. Now, Rajdeep, we have to trust somebody to clean up, Rajdeep. If you don't trust anybody, what will happen? You leave without trust. The last trust is what? The last trust is a new chief minister who has come, and Prime Minister Modi who has made sure there is no, bribing, there's no corruption in New Delhi in the last 8 years. What else is there? If we lose trust in everything, where do we come?
No, here is a citizen who has been...
Hang on. I have a request for you.
Yes, sir.
I have a request for you. There are many activists like Mr. Abraham. I'm sure he can give the names. You must have a special program with all of them to expose to the public the evidence they collected on this kind of massive bribing in Bangalore. Because this has to become so big that everybody will be forced to take action. The courts will have to step in. The CBI will have to step in. The ED has to step in because we have to clean up this mess. This is terrible.
Sir, but the ED has not stepped into Karnataka. The point that we are making, the ED has not stepped into Karnataka. They are going to every other state but Karnataka. Yes, Mr. Abraham.
November 2020, I have approached the ED in Delhi, and they had a reason. The reason they gave me was there's no FIR. We cannot act without an FIR. Now, the next week, I'm going to come to Delhi. I'm going to tell them the FIR is there. Will they move?
Okay.
And another point, Mr. Rajdeep. 2012, we brought in absolute evidence, which was appreciated by the Honorable Supreme Court of India against Mr. S.M. Krishna. The matter has been referred to the SIT, monitored by the Supreme Court. And what happened to Mr. S.M. Krishna? He's with the BJP now. What happened to Mr. Pramod Madhuraj, against whom I had filed a case? 193 crore loan against 1 crore 85 lakh security. 1 crore 85 lakh security, he gets 193 crores. Where is he now?
Okay.
He has been baptized into BJP.
I think you make the point which I think has been emphasized time and again. Remember, this is not an opposition leader saying it, this is an activist. And the fact is, in Karnataka, politicians on both sides have had serious corruption cases against them. At the moment, the BJP is in power. But if the BJP wants to walk the talk and claim what Mohandas Pai is saying on the show, that both Mr. Boma and Mr. Modi want a clean-up, then please act on the charges that are now being put and these FIRs. I appreciate Mohandas Pai and Mr. Abraham for joining me here on the show tonight. We will continue with our focus across the country. We don't discriminate between opposition and government-ruled states. Let's take a break. When we return, we'll turn to the story which will bring a note of sadness. Tennis legend Roger Federer has announced retirement. Mahesh Bhupati joins me on the other side. You're watching the news today. News without the noise.
I noticed something new. You've started using a new body lotion. Fun.
I'm so sorry for the delay. I was on another call. It just kept going on.
No, Papa. You have been a steam bath. Steam bath? At home? 2 steam bath he takes.
Go to your homework.
It's
7:20 already. The kickoff's in 5 minutes. Get all the boys. We have the entire place to ourselves, man. Not working?
Of course it is. But I don't want you guys to be using this bathroom. So use the other one.
Welcome back. After 24 long years, Roger Federer, who won 20 Grand Slams, umpteen other titles on the tour, the former world #1 has finally decided to retire. The Lever Cup that begins next week will be the last appearance of the Swiss legend. Take a look at the life and times of Roger Federer.
It's finally that day. One of the greatest athletes across sports, Roger Federer, has announced his retirement. The Lever Cup that begins next week will be his last before he hangs up his boots. He will no longer be seen on the tour and in the Grand Slams, which he ruled for decades. For the past few years, Federer's career has been plagued with injuries, which have often kept him away from the tour for a significant time. In fact, his last appearance on the court was at the Wimbledon last year. In a lengthy and an emotional statement, Federer said,
"As many of you know, the past 3 years have presented me with challenges in the form of injuries and surgeries. I've worked hard to return to full competitive form, but I also know my body's capacities and limits, and its message to me lately has been clear. I am 41 years old. I've played more than 1,500 matches over 24 years. Tennis has treated me more generously than I ever would have dreamt, and now I must recognize when it is time to end my competitive career."
With his growing age, Federer was falling behind the likes of Nadal and Djokovic, with whom the Swiss legend shared a great rivalry. His last Grand Slam title came in 2018 at the Australian Open, almost 15 years after he won his first major title at the Wimbledon in 2003. During all these years, Federer won 6 Australian Open titles, 1 French Open, 8 Wimbledon and 5 US Open titles, a total of 20 Grand Slam titles, the first man to do it in Open era. Federer was crafty and a true ambassador of the sport, a non-controversial figure who was one of the most liked athletes across the world. His retirement is certainly the end of an era that he started way back in 1998. Sports Bureau, India Today.
I'm joined now by Mahesh Bhupati, former Grand Slam winner and one of India's tennis legends. Appreciate your joining us, Mahesh. It is an end of an era. It's a word we use often in sport in particular. But Roger Federer finally hanging up his boots really means the end of more than 2 decades of wonderful tennis.
Yeah, it was, I think, a day none of us wished would come. But I think, at the back of our minds, we knew it is inevitable. He's been struggling with his knee and his surgeries. And while we would have all wished that he would have had one last hurrah, I think that wasn't meant to be. But, he's given us some amazing memories, which will continue to live and keep watching time and time again.
What for you stands out about Roger Federer? What is it? Is it the Grand Slam titles, the way he played the game, both on and off the court? What stands out for you?
I think it's the entire package, right? I mean, a lot of people, obviously, everyone's seen what an amazing magician he's on the court. Not many people know the kind of guy he's off the court in the locker room. He's always been one of the boys. He always goes out of his way to say hello to everyone, be it the locker room attendant or, all the players. Very humble. It's very hard to find champions who are so talented and have achieved so much that are so humble and always approachable, which, I think was one of his amazing qualities.
There will always be the question, Mahesh, though, whether he's the greatest ever. 20 Grand Slams, Rafa has 22. Do we go by that statistic? What is, according to you, the measure of greatness? Is it possible to measure the top 3? Novak and Roger?
it's going to be a perennial debate even after they're retired, right? I mean, see, I think these guys are all once in a generation athletes, and I think tennis has been lucky to see 4 of them, including Serena, in this era. But unfortunately, I think Roger is going to be a fan favorite regardless of who finishes on top. But you'll have to put him at number 3, in my opinion, because statistics don't lie in tennis. And, he's got a losing record against Rafa and Novak. So it's very hard to, put him up there in the debate.
You're actually saying something which will stir a controversy. I've already got my son on WhatsApp saying, how can Mahesh put Roger, not at the top and Roger at number 3? You're saying just the number of Grand Slams or the head-to-head record is what will settle that debate?
I think, he's behind in both, right? The head-to-head, he's got a losing record against Rafa and Novak, and the number of Grand Slams, they're both ahead of him now. So, I've played all of them. Trust me when I tell you that, nobody can hit the shots like Roger has, or Roger does on the court. I mean, standing on the baseline and hitting half-volley winners down the line, I think it's very hard to explain how incredibly difficult that is, and he's done it at the highest level for 20 years. So, from as far as tennis goes, he's a magician. But I mean, he pushed these 2 guys to work harder and beat his records, which you got to give them credit for that.
One final word: any personal memory from having played with Roger, seen him, known him well? Anything that stands out for you in all these years that you'll never forget?
Yeah, I mean, just the fact that obviously lost to him a bunch of times, beating him at the Olympics was a highlight. But his being approachable. I still remember when he came to India twice to play in Delhi, and how he treated, I mean, everyone obviously was super excited, but how he treated the Indian fans off the court was incredible, because he knew that, his biggest social media following was from India. So he made the extra effort to go the extra mile, and that was really special to see.
Well, Mahesh, as you said, it is an end of an era, and maybe he just sort of created the path for Novak and Rafa to take it even further ahead. And that's life and that's sport, that it's a baton relay. One generation takes it to another. That they were all in the same generation is quite incredible. But Mahesh, always a pleasure talking to you, and you've created a stir by putting Roger at number 3.
Thanks,
Rafa.
thanks, sir.
So who's number 1, by the way? Is it Rafa or Novak?
As of today, Rafa is a solid number 1, but my money's on Novak finishing number 1 in a couple of years.
Okay, let's leave it there. Thanks very much, Mahesh, for joining me here on the news today. We will miss Roger Federer. He was as much part of tennis as strawberries and cream is part of Wimbledon. And speaking of strawberries and cream, Wimbledon in England, our image of the day comes from London, where the Queen's coffin, or Queen Elizabeth's coffin, has finally reached Westminster Hall, where the Queen will lie in state till her funeral on Monday, the 19th of September. Thousands of people are lining up, paying their respects to the late Queen at Westminster Abbey. It's our image tonight. Farewell, Queen Elizabeth. Good night, goodbye. Time for me to say farewell. Namaskar.
So sorry for the delay. I was on another call. It just kept going on.
No, Papa. You are in a steam bath.
Steam bath? At home?
To do steam bath he takes.
Go to your homework.
I don't read the news. I read between the lines to tell you the true version of events. The true story of our times.
To document grief, the toughest assignment for any journalist to be.
From those who matter.
Women politicians going to stick up for each other.
Of those who should matter. I document the truth. I don't distort the truth. I don't glamorize the truth. I don't gloss over the truth.
The ghosts of India's contentious medieval history have come knocking again.
I hustle for the truth, on the ground, in the newsroom, in the studio. I don't try to grab eyeballs.
I inform you to make you see the point.
To the Point with Preeti Chaudhary. At these times, only on India Today.